So good morning, everyone. Can everyone see my screen okay? Good. Awesome.
Yes.
So good morning. My name is Deja Williams, and I am the Environmental Justice Manager for Clean Air NC. Thank you, everyone, for joining us for the second session of the Healthier Education series. Today will be the last of two sessions in this educational series focused on air quality and you. So how air pollution influences our most vulnerable populations, such as pregnant women, children, and the elderly, and what we can do to protect our health from that impact. So we are joined today by Mecklenburg County Public Health Department, Atrium Health, Levine's Children's Center, and of course, Clean Air NC and the Historic West End Green District. So again, on behalf of my organization and the Historic West End Green District and the other lovely organizations and programs we have joining us today, we'd like to thank you so much for participating. This series is a part of educational efforts associated with the Historic West End Green District. So all of the topics today were chosen for and by Historic West End advocates as part of an effort to provide education around what is most important to the community. So for those that may be joining us for the first time or that aren't aware, I always just want to give a little bit of an overview of the Historic West End Green District. So it is a collaborative effort between my organization of Clean Air NC and Historic West End advocates and residents. With goals to implement green infrastructure, strategic tree planting, EV charging stations, and community clean awareness programs, such as the one we are in today. So I did include a QR code here on this slide, and that is to view past clean air awareness programs that we have done. So we've done clean air advocacy trainings in the past. We have also, this is the second session of the Healthier Education series. So if you want to see the first session, you can follow this QR code, just scan it on your phone, or you can type, for those that are calling in, you can type in Clean Air NC/healthy-air-series. So those are for those that are calling in for us today. Again, just, or you can scan that QR code. And just a little bit more background, the efforts of the Green District will and have continue with the goal of contributing to improved air quality, better health outcomes, as well as reducing carbon emissions in an area and air quality emissions in an area where residents have been impacted by environmental injustice. So like always, we give a sincere thank you to all Historic West End community residents for their continued support and uplifting of our program. So before starting the session, like always, I want to go over some housekeeping. So the session will be recorded along with the presentations today and relevant resources that will be provided. So we will send that out to all participants. And as a reminder, participants in this training that are part of the Historic West End community will receive a stipend for completing both sessions. So as always, if you had a neighbor that couldn't make it, or if you needed to see this session later, please feel free to share this recording with them so they're up to speed and able to participate in the second session and receive that stipend. After the second session, we will also be sending out a survey to learn from you and what you may have gathered or found useful within this series as we look to expand this educational effort across other impacted communities. The survey will also help us to determine how you would like to receive your stipend. So be sure to fill out that so we have that information. And then lastly, we will have 4 speakers today. Each presentation will last for approximately 10 to 15 minutes each until around noon. And then we will address questions via a panel and open up the session for dialogue. So questions will be at the end, but if you have questions, feel free to type them in the chat and we'll queue them for our team to answer your questions afterwards. And then after the presentations, you can also raise your hand and we will unmute you, or you can unmute yourself. This is not a Zoom webinar, it's just a regular Zoom meeting, so you can unmute yourself whenever, but we just ask that while people are presenting just to stay muted. And then for those of us that are calling in, I see we have a few numbers calling in. So if you'd like to ask a question, you can press *9 on your phone to raise and lower your hand. And you can also press *6 to mute and unmute yourself. All right, so before getting started, I just wanted to introduce our agenda for today and welcome all of our wonderful speakers. So like last time, I will introduce each speaker more in depth before their allotted time. However, just to give a general overview, our first presentation will focus on air pollution and inequities as it relates to certain health outcomes for our most vulnerable groups. And that will be provided by Kirsten Miner, who is the health manager for our organization, Clean Air NC. And then we will hear from Dr. Erin Levy, who will dive a bit deeper into these impacts in terms of children's health. Following Dr. Levy, we will then hear from Mecklenburg County Public Health Department and learn about some of the key programs within the Division of Population Health. And that will be presented by Dr. Kimberly Scott, who is the Assistant Health Director for Population Health. And then finally, we'll hear from Nurse Betty Marlin, who is the founder of Primary Healthcare of Charlotte and works within the Historic West End community. Nurse Marlin will be giving a background on how to assess yourself for certain triggers when it comes to our health. And then again, after all speakers have gone, we will open up the floor for questions and dialogue. So I just want to introduce our first speaker, Kirsten. She was a speaker on our last session, but for those that are joining us for the first time, I want to give her a proper introduction. So Kirsten Miner is a public health professional with a demonstrated background and commitment to holistic health promotion, equity, and advocacy for historically underserved communities. So having served in various public health settings, including nonprofits, local state governments, and other community-based settings, she is looking forward to listening and learning from the experience of North Carolinians and serving as a positive agent for change and addressing health disparities in communities most impacted by systemic racism. So Kirsten earned her Master of Public Health from Boston University School of Public Health with a social and behavioral sciences concentration. Additionally, she is a certified health education specialist. So with that, I will turn it over to Kirsten.
All right, thank you, Daisha. So again, I will welcome everybody who is new or is returning from session 1. And just to kind of level set more than anything else in the lens that I want and encourage community members to look through is in public health, we use this term social determinants of health, which typically is presented as it's where we live, work, play, and pray. And on the left hand, you see this figure of the Mecklenburg County. They did a health assessment a couple of years back. So it's a little dated, but the information is still relevant. I mentioned in session 1 of how our communities, even in the present day, is still widely shaped by this discriminatory racist practice known as redlining. So this crescent shape that you see, the Historic West End is a historically redlined community. And the same communities that were redlined, and this goes back to the 1930s, still in the present day have higher levels of poverty, less access to multiple resources, whether that's education, but also being a medical desert. So even though that when it comes to health disparities, people can actually still be at greater risk to air pollution despite experiencing the same pollutions, because these are communities that already have existing health disparities. But I just want people to keep that in mind. Next slide. So I'm going to walk us through the different stages of life and the way that air pollution affects us, beginning, of course, with expectant mothers or pregnant women, children, which of course Dr. Levy will go more in depth about. Session 1, we did speak more around adults and chronic disease, so I won't go so much into that, but then of course I'll focus on elderly populations as well. So beginning with mothers and the exposure it has upon a maternal health is that we know that exposure to air pollution and climate change has a negative impact upon pregnant women. Black, Indigenous, and people of color are exposed to higher levels of air pollution as a result of structurally racist practice such as redlining. And prenatal exposure to air pollution has been associated with both preterm birth and low birth weight. And there's increase in research also showing that exposure to air pollution can increase a pregnant mothers' risk for developing preeclampsia or gestational diabetes. And then climate change and air pollution go hand in hand with each other. Climate change is recognized as a threat multiplier that worsens, again, existing health disparities. In this context, I'm referring to maternal health. And as I mentioned in the prior slide, again, women of color and low-income communities are not only experiencing, greater exposure to air pollution, but they're also experiencing the worst impacts of climate change, particularly extreme heat is huge. As it relates to pregnant women, pregnant people are more likely to not only experience heat stroke and exhaustion, they're also more likely to become dehydrated. And the recent studies are also showing that extreme heat exposure alone can increase risk for stillbirth, preterm birth, low birth weight, congenital abnormalities, and infant death soon after birth. So when we speak about environmental justice and climate justice, they go hand in hand with each other. So when it comes to health disparities, health inequities, as I had mentioned, we have a health crisis. It's been a crisis that's been going on for quite some time, for decades in the United States. But Black mothers, even in the present, still continue to be at high risk and are at least 3 times more likely to die from pregnancy complications compared to white mothers. Preterm births, as I mentioned in regard to redline communities, there's actually data and research showing that it's an increased rate of 1.5 times more likely to occur in those redline communities. And I think oftentimes when we talk about health disparities, it's risk sometimes race is presented as a risk factor, but actually racism is the risk factor, not race. And the Center for Disease Control and Prevention actually declared racism as a public health threat. So this requires a multiple of factors, systems, but even providers just listening to the experiences of women so we can reduce these disparities. As it relates to children's health, there's a number of factors, but I'm going to focus on asthma in particular. Asthma is a leading chronic disease among children and adolescents in the United States. Here in North Carolina, there is 6.3 children clinically diagnosed with asthma, and that may be an underestimate because, again, that's assuming that children are accessing healthcare services to be clinically diagnosed. And as I mentioned, there are medical deserts or communities in North Carolina where there are not hospital services or clinical services. But what we do know is that asthma does disproportionately impact Black and Hispanic youth. So for Black children, it's about 13.4%. And then for Puerto Rican children under the age of 18 is 13.7%. And it's estimated that around 600,000 deaths in children under the age of 15 are attributed to joint effects of ambient or outdoor and household air pollution in 2016. So as it relates to common asthma triggers, if you can go back one slide, sorry, Tasia. Indoor and outdoor pollution are contributing factors, but as in bold, of course, I mentioned climate change and outdoor air pollution. That includes allergies, but even in North Carolina, proximity to concentrated animal feeding operations or CAFOs is another trigger. Next slide. So we know that asthma, it's when it comes to just in the state, there's high rates of asthma in the Eastern Carolina communities as well. So I just wanted to mention that since we're focusing on disparities. And then when it comes to senior health, in 2018, and this is coming from the CDC, the leading cause of death for seniors 65 years of age or older is heart disease, cancer, chronic lower respiratory disease, stroke, and Alzheimer's disease. All 5 of those leading causes of deaths in seniors can be caused or exacerbated by air pollution exposures. Seniors are also at increased risk of experiencing complication from heat exposure. And that is mostly attributed to reduced ability to adapt, such as accessing support services. And heat-related deaths are actually the most commonly reported among seniors. So to kind of end on a positive note, we always have to, of course, increase awareness. What's the issue? But we don't just want to address the issue. What are ways that we can actually build resiliency and mitigate those impacts at a local level and then at a larger level? Is that, of course, we want to prevent, control, and reduce air pollutants. And that looks like, of course, supporting a transition away from fossil fuels and embracing renewable energy sources. When it comes to agriculture, even in your local, gardening, reducing use of pesticides, and of course, eco-friendly transportation and green communities, all initiatives are within the historic West End Green District.
All right, thank you so much, Kirsten, for that great overview. I'd now like to invite our second speaker, welcome our second speaker, Dr. Erin Levy. So Dr. Erin Levy is a pediatrician at Atrium Health, Levine Children's Hospital here in Charlotte, North Carolina, which is also where he completed his pediatric training. He was born and raised in Nashville, Tennessee, completed his undergraduate education at Emory University in Atlanta, Georgia, followed by his osteopathic medical degree at Lincoln Memorial University in Harrogate, Tennessee. He has a strong interest in how climate change and air quality impacts health, particularly children's health. He is currently the healthcare representative on the Mecklenburg County Air Quality Commission, advisory board member for our organization Clean Air NC, a member of North Carolina's Clinicians for Climate Action, and an American Academy of Pediatric Climate Advocate for North Carolina. He teaches medical trainees and others about the relationship between climate and health in hopes that they can help their patients and their communities. In his free time, he enjoys exploring the outdoors with his lovely wife, Jessie, his 2-year-old daughter, Josie, and their dog, Jack. So thank you so much for joining us today, Dr. Levy, and I will pass the floor to you.
Thank you so much for that lovely introduction. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and see if I can back it up here. Good morning, everybody. I'm very grateful for the opportunity to be able to be with you here today. I sat in on the last session, which was awesome. I think some of the things that I'll talk about are reinforcing and highlighting some of the things that Kirsten and some of the other speakers have already mentioned, but hopefully go into a little bit more deep dive into my perspective as a pediatrician and some of the children's health issues we see as an effect result from climate change and air pollution. So I bring up this slide because I feel like this has often been the poster child of climate change, this often a faraway land, polar bear on a melting glacier. And yes, that is important and is an implication of climate change. But I don't really feel like it hits home for people as much as it should. And so this is who I see. This is what climate change and air pollution is for me, for our local community. This child is obviously breathing in an inhaler, has underlying asthma. And as a pediatrician, I'm a pediatrician in the hospital. So I only take care of children who are sick enough to be hospitalized. And it's rare to have a shift where I don't take care of a child with asthma. And too often I see the same children come back with recurrent asthma exacerbations, asthma flares. And so even though I can treat them in the short term, sometimes I feel like it's often a Band-Aid with all the issues that continue to contribute to their asthma, to their health. And so I've really, over the past several years, really put an emphasis on something I'm passionate about, which is climate health and prevention of some climate-related health issues, especially in children. So that's where I'll kind of guide my talk, and I'll be open to any questions afterwards. But just want to highlight that children are a sensitive group. Just being a child is something that makes them vulnerable. And so Kirsten actually mentioned prematurity, and air pollution actually has been found to increase the risk of preterm labor, increase the risk of low birth weight. And that by itself is already an issue, but it comes with a lot of secondary effects. So when we're born too early, babies can have risk for learning behavior issues and brain development, for their lung development and breathing, for feeding issues. Their immune system is underdeveloped, and so they're at increased risk for infection. And all their organs can actually be affected because they're not fully developed. So this risk for prematurity has a lot of implications for health, both in the short term and long term for these children, and mothers and families taking care of these children. Even for healthy full-term children, lungs are still developing after birth. You can see in this picture up at the right, these little grape-like sacs that are at the end of the lungs. That's where oxygen's exchanged, and those are still developing after birth. So these air pollutants can not only affect the development before children are born, but also afterwards as they're in this sensitive stage of lung development. Children just naturally breathe more rapidly than adults. You can see on the graphic on the right, infants actually breathe up to 60 times a minute normally, whereas an adult would breathe about 12 to 20 times a minute. So they're breathing up to 3 times as fast as adults. And so taking in 3 times the amount of air, and if we're talking about poor air quality or air pollution, that's not insignificant. We're talking about extreme heat. Children don't regulate their temperature as well, and so they're at increased risks of heat exhaustion, heat stroke, and some of the direct effects from the from warming of these hotter days that we see. And then they just have immature immune systems. So if their lungs are are not as well developed, or have exposure to some of these pollutants that may make their lungs more sensitive, they may be at increased risk for respiratory infections or other types of infections that we'll talk about. And you've probably all seen a chart like this, the air quality index, just again to highlight that children are listed as considered a sensitive population, especially children with asthma. And so you can see on those orange days, those kind of more sensitive days during the summer where ozone and other pollutants may be have more effect on these children, be at a higher level. These children should limit their exposure to the outdoors. And so it's something to be aware of as we monitor air pollution, and as we're more aware as individuals and communities when those days happen. So this is a, let me let it go ahead and load. This is kind of a busy slide, but it's kind of a full scope, kind of a bird's eye view of all the health related issues related to climate change. So just to kind of simplify, kind of looking at the outer border here, we can see all the direct impacts or indirect impacts that climate has on our health. From some of the things we've already talked about, like heat related illness for those hotter days, to other issues from lung asthma issues, cardiovascular disease. And then also it's actually, with these warming climate, we are actually seeing increased risk of some diseases that we wouldn't normally see in North Carolina. Mosquito-borne illnesses that are kind of making their way to more southern, to more northern states, or more southern states, depending on where they normally were. For instance, West Nile virus, we're starting to see more of when we wouldn't normally with these increasing temperatures. Allergy seasons are becoming more prolonged and severe. I think everybody could probably speak to that, but children are extra sensitive to some of these allergens that may worsen their breathing. And then water quality and food quality and the impacts of extreme weather and droughts and floods impact some of those resources. As Kirsten talked about, some of these both medical deserts, but also food deserts, it's important to consider these populations that may be affected by some of these changes. And then I think something that's less talked about is kind of the secondary impacts, which is when we have these big issues of extreme weather or floods. We've seen them recently and even in the news. What impact does that have on children and families and their mental health and their development? And so these are all kind of intertwined issues that have an impact on children as they grow. So I think you've seen these slides in the last session, but I just really want to highlight some of the key pollutants that we talk about and that actually can have a direct impact on children's lung function. So ozone. Ozone is just a fancy chemical reaction between some of the chemicals like nitrogen oxides and volatile organic chemicals, VOCs, or compounds, excuse me, that combine with heat and sunlight and form ozone. So those chemicals come from transportation sources, come from industries, and then when you combine that with a hot summer day, you have the perfect storm to create this ozone pollutant. It's worse in urban areas, these asphalted, more hot areas in the afternoon on hot sunny days in the summer typically. And as we see here, it's actually got a direct impact on children's health and on health of actually every individual. But it's actually been shown to increase asthma exacerbations, increase emergency room visits, increase school absences and thus work absences for parents. And so this pollutant alone has a direct impact on children, not even to mention all the other contributing impacts to air pollution and other health impacts. And then this slide was also previously shown, but just again to reiterate one of the other highlighted pollutants, which is particulate matter. Specifically particulate matter 2.5, which is just the number to represent the size, 2.5 microns. And you can see here, much, much, much smaller than even a grain of sand or human hair. And so something that we can't always see, but has, again, a direct impact on our breathing. It's a direct airway irritant, so especially affects people, children with asthma and lung issues. And then it's small enough to even enter into our bloodstream and affect our cardiovascular system as well. And again, that's a pollutant that comes from industrial facilities and transportation, automobiles. So kind of hear that as a recurring theme as a source. And again, exposure to this pollutant is also been shown. We have evidence to show that it's increased risk of asthma and persistent wheezing in children. So not just a contributing factor, but a direct factor on some children, especially with underlying illness. This is just a slide that shows, and we all know this, but that the number of projected days greater than 90 degrees over the coming decades, you can see that number and intensity creeping up north into our area as well. And so the direct impact of heat cannot be understated, especially with infants that have poor heat regulation, young children that are outside playing. We can see a direct impact from those hot days on heat exhaustion. They can cause heat stroke, heat-related illness, dehydration, but also contributes to the the issue of developing ozone, developing some of these air pollutants, and continuing to contribute to climate change. And this is again to emphasize that these issues are contributing to extreme weather events, from hurricanes in the southeast. We see the hurricane that's recently affected Puerto Rico, to the floods, as we saw recently in Mississippi, to the ongoing wildfires and droughts out west. There is not ever typically a time where we are spared from some of these events. They're becoming more frequent, more severe, and not only are they expensive and not only are they deadly, but they have ongoing repercussions for children and families in the areas that live in these extreme weather areas. And let's not forget, even kind of highlighting one of the, I guess it's not so recent anymore, but Hurricane Katrina and the impacts that that had on families and relocation and their children's development and mental health and their water quality and their food resources, and every aspect of their life was turned upside down. And this is a continuing effect from other hurricanes, from other extreme weather events. And so I think something that doesn't, I think something that's important to highlight, especially when we think about, even in this picture, a young baby that was affected by Katrina. There's actually a documentary on it now, but basically the impacts that that's had on their upbringing. And this has been highlighted nicely. Kirsten did a lovely job kind of mentioning that we have already a disproportionate, we already have disproportionate health impacts on BIPOC children and citizens. But on top of that, the red line communities, historically red line communities, have created these perfect storms for basically heat islands, these urban heat islands that have traffic or highways that have been ripped right through communities, that have high density of industrial and factory sources, and basically have created a localized area for air pollutants, and with a direct impact on people in that community's health that are already predisposed to health disparities. So that's just to highlight that. I think Kirsten went a little bit further into that as well. But as far as children go, preterm birth rate is already more than 50% higher in Black women than among white women. And so if we already, part of that is probably a contributing factor from air pollution, but also to understand all the health effects that go along with that. And then the rate of Black children with asthma is twice as much as white children. And I tell you, I can see that when I'm about to go on shift in a couple of hours, those are the children that I see most that are representing with asthma. And so as we continue to learn about the effects of air pollution, it feels very difficult to always explain that to the medical community and to explain that to families, but it's true. We see it in the numbers that these disparities within communities and their exposure to air pollution can also have an impact on their health. And here's an example. Even though we know studies predict that thousands and thousands of deaths can be attributed to air pollution and climate-related effects, this is actually the first time that it's been listed as a cause of death, which was this child named Ella, a 9-year-old in London who lived near a busy road with high air pollution, had recurrent asthma attacks, and ultimately passed away from an asthma attack, and was determined that part of that cause of her death was due to air pollution exposure. And so again, even though we know that air pollution contributes to many children's illness, and ultimately some of the children who don't survive their illness, this is a first time where it's highlighted. And I think important to highlight that air pollution has a direct effect on her health, and unfortunately contributed to her death. And so again, I'm going to try to end on a positive note, just like Kirsten, because it feels like a lot of doom and gloom, but there's a lot we can do, and there's a lot that's already being done. So one, my passion is about education. And so what we're doing today is important, and just being aware and educating ourselves on the impacts so that we can better speak with our representatives and speak with our community members about the issue. I'm also working with medical students and those in medical training and my counterparts about climate health and how it impacts our communities and the patients that we treat every day, and how it can we can help prevent some of the illnesses that we see. Things that the Historic West End Green District is developing, things that I was talking to Mr. Ross just about how far things have come in the last few years, but continuing to develop our air monitoring and early warning systems, and making those basically so that we understand where the pollution is coming from, and understand the localized areas where they may be at higher risk. Improving our tree canopy, green spaces, developing our communities so that they have those protections and natural protections from air pollution. And then reducing our emissions and creating basically clean neighborhoods and clean energy neighborhoods where we have more access to alternative transportation, including bike paths, greenways, and then clean energy transportation like light rails and other forms of making sure it's, for instance, electric vehicles are more accessible and affordable. We have the infrastructure to make those a reality for all communities. There's my sources. And again, I'm open to any questions. And I thank you for your time and including me in this discussion.
Thank you so much, Dr. Levy. We really appreciate your background, your knowledge, and you as a service provider providing that information to other doctors and to your patients and to other medical students. So thank you so much for that great background. We really appreciate it. And Dr. Levy mentioned a few times, being aware of your air quality is a great step towards understanding your exposure. You can go to airnow.gov to see air quality near you. We also have air monitors available for Historic West End residents, and these measure particulate matter. We have about 13 within the Historic West End community already, but if you are interested in getting one yourself and putting it outside of your home, please contact us and we will be more than happy to set those up for you. And we'll get a little bit more into that at the end. But just to get into our next speaker, we will be having Dr. Kimberly Scott speak to us a little bit about her role and some of the main services that they provide within her department. So Dr. Scott serves as the Mecklenburg County Public Health Assistant Health Director for Population Health. She has spent more than 13 years in public health, advancing population health improvement through equitable and innovative policies, processes, and programming. Before joining Mecklenburg County Public Health, Dr. Scott led population health initiatives for Wake County Health and Human Services, including Live Well Wake, which is a collective impact initiative aiming to improve population health outcomes in partnership with their most vulnerable residents. In this role, she convened more than 150 local partners to identify and advance shared community health improvement goals. Dr. Scott earned her Bachelor of Science degree from Albany State University, her Master of Public Health degree from Georgia Southern University, and her Doctor of Public Health in Advanced Practice Leadership from the University of South Florida. So thank you so much, Dr. Scott, for being with us, and I will stop sharing my screen to let you share your screen.
Thank you so much for that introduction, and thank you for having me today. Let me try to share my screen. Are you all able to see my screen?
Yes.
Great. So again, thank you for the invitation to join you all. It's a pleasure to be here representing Mecklenburg County Public Health. In full disclosure, I am very new to the team. I've been a part of Mecklenburg County Public Health for about 7 months. So I am really enjoying getting connected with my now community and home of Charlotte. I'm so really excited about joining you today and learning more about the work that you all are leading. Also, in full disclosure, I am not an expert in the area of climate and environmental justice. However, climate and environmental justice is an important part of public health. So today I'll share a little bit about some of the work that's happening in our population health division within Mecklenburg County Public Health. Just to hear a little bit more about some initiatives that we have underway that are specifically aiming to reduce health inequities, focusing on chronic disease prevention, and some specific initiatives that we have in place to focus on improving birth outcomes. So I'll just dive right into the presentation. And first, population health is a mouthful. It's can be a difficult idea to capture or terminology to capture. So I'd like to start by just doing a little level setting. This first image is a picture of a nice Amazon rainforest. And at bird's eye view, it looks very green and lush and like everything is thriving. But if we take a deeper dive and go boots on the ground, we see things like this image that's shown, which is the Rafflesia flower, which is a flower that is endangered. But from that bird's eye view, you can't always see what's happening boots on the ground. So our population health work and our approach to population health work is really being boots on the ground to see what's happening in communities, what populations are most likely impacted by various health inequities that are impacting our communities. So one of my favorite professors, her favorite quote was, "You have to see the leaf on the tree in the forest." So population health is really looking at that leaf on the tree in the forest. I've added one stat as an example of that. In 2020, our Mecklenburg County infant deaths declined overall. So for every 1,000 births, there were 5 infants that died before their first birthday. And that was a decline from our 2019 data. But if you take a step further and look at that leaf on the tree in the forest, in that same year, 10 Black infants died before their first birthday compared to 3.3 white infants. So Black infant deaths were 3 times higher than white infant deaths. So this data was compiled by our community health assessment that was referenced earlier, and we're proud to announce that we'll have new data available soon for you all to review and consume to understand what's happening locally within the community. But I wanted to start with this example just to show the importance of having good data to support any efforts that we make towards improving health so that we can really see what's happening boots on the ground in our communities. So our approach to population health is just that, figuring out what those differences in health outcomes look like between historically marginalized populations or groups. And that might include categorization by race or ethnicity, socioeconomic status, gender, or other things like zip code or location. So how do we organize our work? The Population Health Division has several efforts and initiatives underway to provide direct services, systems and policy level work, and a variety of other initiatives, all with the goal of improving health outcomes within community. And today I'd like to focus on our Office of Health Equity, which is an office that has been reimagined over the last 6 months, and we're really excited about the direction we're headed with this work. Our Office of Health Equity was formerly our Office of Community Engagement, but we've realigned some of our programs and initiatives to group together some efforts that have similar goals and missions of advancing health equity. So we have community engagement work, a community health worker initiative, a new initiative that's joined our health equity work called Improving Community Outcomes for Child and Maternal Health, and a community grants initiative. And I'll talk a little bit more about some of these initiatives as I advance in the presentation, but I wanted to specifically call out that we do have an Office of Health Equity that's dedicated to really exploring the root causes of these inequities that are impacting our community and working alongside community to make sustainable change in these spaces. If we were to do an overlay of the redlining maps that have been referenced and some of our chronic disease issues that impact community and our maternal and child health birth disparities, we would see that there are similarities across all of these maps when we look at the highest priority areas. So I think there's definitely room to see the connectivity between how our environment can impact our health. So although our work is not specifically rooted in environmental justice work, all of this work is connected. All of this work is connected. And I hope that some of the initiatives that are highlighted today further highlight that point. So I'll just dive a little deeply into a few of our initiatives that we have underway to advance health equity. One of our core initiatives in our Office of Health Equity is our Village Heartbeat program. And many of you may be familiar with this program. Many of you may have participated in this program over the years. It's one of our staple programs, flagship programs that it's just really become a part of our culture within our department. So Village Heartbeat stands for Building Education and Accountability Together. And the purpose of this initiative was to partner with our local faith-based organizations to aim to reduce chronic disease disparities in partnership with our local health department. And this was done through a variety of initiatives. One of the core parts of this work includes a competition challenge that occurs every year, where faith-based organizations organize into teams to focus on increasing physical activity, healthy eating and lifestyles, and also working alongside a team of dedicated facilitators and educators to just strengthen resources, knowledge, and health literacy to make informed health decisions. Our competition challenge has been highly successful. With our most recent season, about 56 of our participants improved their overall biometrics or health outcomes. Most notably, about 75% of those participants improved their A1C, which we know is an indicator that can determine whether or not one might have prediabetes or diabetes. So this program includes a team of community ambassadors, health educators to really create an environment that makes healthy choices easier choices, including free gym memberships, access to healthy food, and other resources that may help meet particular health goals. The next core piece of this initiative includes the Hub Expansion Program. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a future slide and show some references to this program. But this program includes financial resources to support faith-based organizations that are looking to make systems changes in their communities. So if there's a lack of opportunity for folks to participate in physical activity, this funding source can help those organizations create walking trails so that people can have access to spaces to safely participate in healthy activities. And the last core initiative is our Leadership Academy, which focuses on just providing space for continued health education and information from trusted resources, including community ambassadors and community health workers who are most connected to these faith-based organizations. And just have a quick little snapshot of some of our participants from this most recent season. The Hub Expansion Program that I mentioned this year resulted in 4 new community walking trails, 3 community gardens, 5 healthy food distribution sites, and 177 educational workshops. When thinking about community gardens, there was reference to some of the tree canopies and the importance of creating space for tree canopies in communities. And many of our community gardens outside of this picture shown do have connectivity to urban garden initiatives that also can support those tree canopy initiatives. So although, again, some of this work is not directly rooted in environmental justice, these systems changes that take place through programs to improve chronic disease can also significantly impact environmental health outcomes. Here's an example of a couple of the walking trails that were created as a part of the initiative. This particular example is Faith CME Church here in Charlotte. I'd like to transition quickly to talk a little bit about our community health worker program. This is another new initiative for our team in that we work with a variety of community partners to employ community health workers who are rooted in community, from community, to connect residents to various health resources necessary to navigate the health system, connect to social supports and resources in order to get access to any resources necessary to thrive. So we we are excited to partner with a variety of groups from our health systems to local nonprofits to expand access to community health workers. One particular community health worker program that we started focuses on pregnant persons within the community. This particular initiative is called A Guided Journey, and it's in its second year of pilot work. We work in partnership with Caring, and we've worked in partnership with Symmetry over the past year to connect pregnant persons to community health workers who can help them connect with any social supports or any resources that may be helpful to having a healthy pregnancy. So some things that our community health workers help support include establishing a medical home if persons don't have access to medical resources, connecting to food assistance, transportation, housing resources, all of those stressors that may impact the duration or quality of a pregnancy through this community health worker who is knowledgeable of systems and can help persons navigate systems if they don't have access to those resources. They also provide education on the pregnancy process and connect each person to a variety of resources with aims of reducing those maternal and child health disparities. Quickly transition over to our Office of Chronic Disease Policy and Prevention, which is another arm of our population health team that focuses on creating policies that make, again, healthy choices easier choices. So we do work in 3 buckets, including food security, built environment, and tobacco prevention and control. Our food security work, I have an example of a photo here with one of our refrigeration sites where we work with stores to get access to refrigerators, which might be corner stores and food deserts, so that they can be supplied with fresh, healthy produce at affordable cost. We also, again, I mentioned the community gardens and urban gardens that our team helps to edify or build throughout the community, which can also address some of the tree canopy issues. We also do a significant amount of work trying to focus on built environment policy to make sure that our community is built in a way that supports healthy activity and healthy lifestyles. So that could be anything from sidewalks within communities to designating green spaces for parks, having advocates on our team who can help navigate those policy decisions that are made to ensure that we create space for healthy communities. And the last piece of work is tobacco prevention and control. This particular bucket of work, we've had made significant progress in advocating for local policies to strengthen just tobacco restrictions within our community so that people can have access to clean air through tobacco control initiatives. Our team has worked most recently with several of our local colleges and universities to strengthen their local policies surrounding tobacco use. And as we know, there's a link between tobacco exposure and asthma, all of these things, again, connecting to some of the data that's been shared throughout the day. So our team does significant work in working with different organizations who are hoping to strengthen their policies to reduce exposure to tobacco for their clientele. And I quickly want to summarize that we also provide grant-making opportunities to address these various disparities. We know that, again, the environmental justice arm, as I mentioned, is not the core of this work, but it's a both-and approach. We have to address what's happening on the chronic disease end when people are faced with a variety of chronic diseases from diabetes to cancer and focus on preventing those things, but also while systematically trying to address some of these barriers that are impacting how the climate change issues and environmental justice issues are impacting our community. So again, while working on the systems side to address some of those policies and systems change necessary to improve our environment, we're also working collectively to address some of the outcomes from the chronic disease side that are directly impacting community. One of our grassroots community grant-making funds over this last year, we awarded roughly $180,000 to community-based organizations who are striving to reduce those health disparities or chronic disease disparities that are impacting communities. And through this initiative, we provide technical support and resources so that communities who are boots on the ground can have access to funding to address issues such as diabetes prevention or management, obesity reduction, access to healthy foods, have resources from the county to support their efforts. And one final example that I'd like to highlight from our population health team is a case study or a pilot initiative that we launched this year called Place Streets 704. And Place Streets is an initiative that focuses on creating safe spaces for youth and families and neighborhoods to assemble, to have space for physical activity and socialization. We know that there are many disparities when we look at our communities of color with access to parks and green space. So this concept brings parks to community. In partnership with our public health team, Parks and Recreation, community partners, nonprofit agencies, we work to identify places within the community where we can either shut down a street or a parking lot to create pop-up parks. And through this process, there's space for communities to convene and connect. With this Place Streets model, we've also been able to bring together community-based organizations to one space so that connectivity can be made to additional resources that might support communities. Our inaugural event that was kicked off this year was held in the Hidden Valley community, and we had a great turnout with about 500 residents. So in closing, I'd just like to reiterate that environmental health is public health. It's all related. And, climate and environmental justice are public health issues. So climate-related risks are not experienced equally by all population groups, just like the health disparities that were identified. Historic displacement through redlining and systemic racism impact people's lives and the quality of life in the communities they reside in. And we can see that again through the health disparities that were highlighted throughout today's conversation. And finally, I'd like to just mention that beyond our public health space, Mecklenburg County has made a commitment towards environmental justice. And our Board of County Commissioners in 2021 passed an environmental leadership policy that's associated with an action plan. So the action plan will be informed through working with community. Many of you may be involved in some of the work that's happening in that space to just understand how climate change is impacting our communities of color throughout the county. So I'm happy to share additional resources about that work that's happening with my colleagues from the Environmental Justice Unit within our county health infrastructure, if there's additional resources that might be provided by that team. And with that, I'll close and thank you all for the opportunity to share.
Thank you so much, Dr. Kimberly Scott, for your work and for sharing the wonderful work that the county is doing to advance health outcomes for our most vulnerable communities. We really appreciate your participation today. So I'm going to just turn it over. I see we already have some questions coming in the chat. So we will get right to those as soon as our next speaker goes, who is actually here in the office with me today. So I'm just going to turn over my camera to her. If you'll just give me 1 second to reshare my screen. Apologies. All right, so our last speaker will be Nurse Betty Marlin. Nurse Betty Marlin is actually a nurse within the Historic West End community, so she is a resource to you as well as our other speakers today. But Nurse Betty E.J. Marlin has served humbly as a professional nurse since 1966. She graduated from UNC Charlotte with a Bachelor of Science in Nursing and later with a Master of Science as a parent-child clinical nurse specialist or advanced practice nurse nurse in 1985. She also became certified as a forensic nurse examiner at the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill in 1999. Nurse Marlin's experience as a floating hospital nurse, nursing instructor, and community health nurse prepared her to be the founder, owner, and CEO of Primary Healthcare of Charlotte in 1987. Nurse Marlin has also been a pioneer for establishing wellness care in the inner city Charlotte and underserved communities in Zambia, Israel, Haiti, and Honolulu, making her a strong holistic advocate and community health caregiver for underserved communities and underserved communities here in Charlotte, but also across the world, putting the power of healthcare back in the hands of those receiving it. So we are so grateful to have Nurse Marlin here with us today. So some of the slides that she wanted to share are scanned in one-pagers, which we will be providing. They kind of uploaded a little wonky, so hopefully if those can't see it today, I will be sending this out as a resource so you can open it and see them a little bit more readily. So I'm just gonna turn it over to her.
Great morning. I just wish you well, whole and holy. We started the Historic West End Wellness Association in about 20 years ago on Betty's Ford Road. The Lord brought me to the highest prostitute and drug corner in the city, and this little farm girl was really not prepared. I was used to getting tobacco worms off tobacco and chopping corn and cotton, and you know, it's really, the farm is the healthiest place to be. The farms, the streams. And so we're going to talk about things that, to wrap up, I'm going to talk about some do's and don'ts to bring together everything that our wonderful previous healthcare providers have presented. So you want to wear a mask, especially 1 hour before and 1 hour after sunrise and sunset. Those are the highest pollen times. If my children are going to come in with asthma attacks, that's when it's going to be. So if the sun comes up at 7, they need to be inside the house, the car, the school bus, between 6 and 8. And in the afternoon, if the sun goes down at 8, they need to be inside between 7 and 9. And isn't this the time that most of us are out, cutting grass, etc., children playing? You also want to wear a mask when you're using sprays, whether you're spray painting, disinfectant sprays. All of this is going in your lungs. Try to use natural deodorants instead of spray deodorants, using natural things on your hair when you wash your hair, and dry your hair. Make sure that you detox. I think detoxing is one of the key things in preventing heart attacks, strokes, asthma, eczema, and you see a lot of that with pollution. So some of the things that we need to do is to use our fresh fruits and vegetables. We haven't mentioned that. If I find a praying mantis or beetles and stuff, or a case, praying mantis case, I make sure I transport that very carefully to my vegetable area, my garden. I guess I had the first community garden in Charlotte 35 years ago. In my cross ties, I planted strawberries and herbs and stuff, and realized that I was feeding the homeless and didn't even know it. So I started planting fruit trees and stuff on the access ramp, so that those people in churches need to do that too. Areas where homeless walk, where they sit, where they drink. And so being accessible and being mindful of your neighbors. Our neighbor could be anyone. It could be someone coming by in a car. My corner is probably the #1, we're going to find out, polluted corner in the city, because I have 77, Brookshire, and 85 around me. I have railroad tracks. I have the truck drivers, bless their heart, that put out the pollutants. So my time out and opening my windows, opening your windows is a crucial thing. Don't have those windows open 1 hour before and 1 hour after sunset. Make sure that you have natural sweeteners in honey. Those things that, like ginger, that are anti-inflammatories in your diet. I had a parent, a child had a lot of allergies. I said, have you thought about making just little icy pops with ginger mint, sweetened with honey? Because honey is a healer too. And then making sure we exercise on natural products. The bricks is a good idea. Asphalt, we should really stay away from. And I see a lot of the hopscotch and stuff with some asphalt. That's something we can improve. Our walking trails, our tracks, those kinds of things should be natural products instead of man-made. Rubber on the playground is very toxic. And around your plants, I tell people not to put old tires and stuff like that, because that oil and stuff is seeping in the ground. Make sure you sleep 8 to 10 hours. You need that for healing and for detoxing your body. No, and I'm going to hit a real nerve. No computers and phones and stuff within an hour of bedtime. No smoking within an hour of bedtime. It makes your blood vessels small. And so therefore you can't get the oxygen supply to your kidneys and your brain to remove those toxins. You need to drink at least 8 to 10 glasses of water a day. For the elderly, it's a little smaller. For the children, it's a little smaller. Some people say 10% of your body weight. That is questionable to me because I am in a high chronic disease community. The Northwest end, we have a lot of obesity, diabetes from taking blood pressure medicines and stuff. We are a high medicated area too. And so anything, I tell my people, look at your fingers. Who made this? Did God make this or did man make this? And we want to get rid of the things that are chemically man-made and increase those things that God made. Having flowers around your property, putting herbs, whether it's rosemary, ginger, mint. Now, rosemary can increase your blood pressure. You're thinking that all herbs are good, but if you have low blood pressure like I do, yeah, you can eat rosemary and stuff, but you need to be careful. Get good, healthy advice before you start filling up your cabinets, $2,000, $3,000, $4,000 worth of herbs you're not going to take. Make sure that you use natural estrogens like soy and red clover and ginger. Fresh air, 30 minutes a day. Now, this is not city air. This is country air, and I love to go to the farm, sit on the front porch swing, make you a natural area. If you have a condo or apartment, I would look at the decks and see what's on them as I go around the city. Is it rubber tires, bicycles, or is it plants and flower boxes and things like that? Contact with the earth and plants. We've talked about that. Quiet time. Just laughing with the children, praising the Lord, fellowship, and just encouraging people, putting others first, using natural pests near the bottom, and also like beetles and things like that. So vitamins in spring water. Get rid of as much chlorine as we can, pharmaceuticals, magic bullets, decongestants, pesticides, herbicides, sprays. Get rid of smoking, sun lamps, especially in the house and car. Set up aside for those people that've got to smoke. If you're born tobacco, you're going to have late allergies too, like I do. But the tobacco, if you put it around your flowers and stuff, it'll kill germs, it'll kill fungus, but to smoke it, it can be lethal. So things you want to do are, we mentioned detoxing. You need to wash from head to toe. The dirtiest part of your body is the lower part of your body. So you want to wash the top part of your body first, front to back. You know, those basic things that we go, just simple to hard things. Using saline to clean out a child's sinuses instead of decongestants and those artificial things. Washing our hands before each meal, before we go to bed. Where are you going to put your hands? On your face. Fold them and pray. Wash your hands before taking care of sores, discharge, and after taking care of them. Wash your hands before brushing your teeth. How many of you guys run from the outside, run to the bathroom, dirty hands, and start brushing your teeth? Putting on cream. Wash your hands before mealtime. Also, after blowing our nose, going to the bathroom, working or playing, touching plants or animals, cleaning a wound, a sore, or discharge. Have your windows down at night. I can keep people out of the emergency room if they'll keep the pets off their bed, out of the bedroom. In a special, we had set up a special room for our pets in the utility room and beside the garage. So that is a big source of problem. Let me talk about that detox as we close. Some simple detoxes. One is just 16 ounces of apple juice and juice of 2 squeezed lemons. Drink it slow first thing in the morning and drink water the rest of the day. If you get hungry, which I don't, you can eat a fruit salad or a vegetable salad at night. Make sure that 3/4 of your intake is fruits and vegetables. You can have your own little lemon bush, your own little orange trees, and children love it. I would say also think about room purifiers and ionizers. One of my volunteers stole my room purifier. So I'm going to have to replace that. Your ionizer kills germs. The room purifier cleans the air. Also, if there's illness or you need to change if you're well, even you need to change your covers for your vents, for your air conditioners. Spray disinfectant, don't smoke around them. Don't use flammables when you are spraying your vent covers. If somebody gets sick, you want to change them every 3 days, 3 to 4 days. You have the mamas and daddies to kill initially when somebody first gets sick. And then in 3 to 4 days, you want to kill the babies. So changing your filters, your air filters is really important. And just loving yourself and loving other people. Decrease toxic, negative people in your life. And sometimes, Khadijah, that is really hard because that's family members. But you can say, you know what? I really love you. But unless you say something positive to me, you're going to have to leave the room or I'm going to have to leave the room. Love yourself. Love others. Ask the Lord what he needs you to do and how you can be healthy. I think another serious problem with ladies, pregnant and the elderly, is their hair care. Hair dyes can be toxic. And we haven't talked about cosmetics and cleaning agents and stuff like that. But the more natural you can use, the better it is.
Thank you so much, Dr. Marlin.
Nurse Marlin.
Nurse Marlin, sorry, excuse me, for giving that overview of how we can protect our health at home. I now, again, Nurse Marlin as a resource, she is a practicing and resident of, practicing nurse and resident of the historic West End community. So she is a resource to you with holistic health. So I now just wanted to open up the floor to some questions. I know we already got some within the chat. So I will, excuse me, start where the first question is. So it's for Dr. Levy. So can you please provide an example of a typical appointment with parents of a child that has asthma, conversation recommendations, etc.? What kind of questions should a parent ask a physician?
Yeah, thanks. Well, I haven't had the experience recently of having a conversation in the office, but I do have conversations with parents and families in the hospital, whether it be when they're first coming in at their worst of illness or prior to discharge. And I think that's, again, where we talk about asthma specifically as squeezy airways. They're reacting to something, okay? And so we have to talk about what their trigger is. And we've talked about some of those things, from allergens to infections to environmental exposures like smoke or other environmental exposures. And then kind of the unseen exposure, which is the underlying air pollution or irritants. And so what I talk to them about is, one, how do we first of all prevent future, I tell them, I love seeing you guys, but I don't want to see you again in the hospital. So how do we prevent you from being back here? There's some continuity between us in the hospital to the pediatricians that you see in the office for your well child care, for asthma care. And so we talk about preventing or avoiding or preventing those triggers, or treating those triggers. So if you have exposure to certain allergens, let's avoid those allergens. If we talk about being on certain medications to help prevent those exposures. But I found, Mr. Ross, so frustrating is I can't always have them avoid outside. We can limit exposure on those highest risk days. And I know you've been a big proponent of air monitoring and being aware of when those days are highest risk for those children. And so having awareness, I talk to them about where they can go see those sources, whether it be on their phone or on the website at airnow.gov, or on the radio or on the TV or in the newspaper, wherever they get their information from on a daily basis. For people that have underlying health conditions or that are sensitive or vulnerable populations, which is almost everybody now, to be aware of what the air quality is that day. And you can look that up if you have a phone. There's a weather app. You can actually see that now, along with what the temperature is going to be outside that day and if it's going to rain or not. So air quality needs to be a part of our weather forecast, and it is. And so those parents and families need to be aware of when, obviously we want children to be playing. We want children to play outside. We want them to get their exercise. We want to prevent some of those illnesses that can be from lack of activity, but we also want them to be doing it in a way that is at the right timing. And so avoiding those afternoon hot sunny days where the ozone or air pollution may be at greatest risk, because again, that's the unseen or the invisible enemy that we're up against, and why I think our conversation today, which focuses so much on prevention, is so important. Because I have only so many Band-Aids and medications to give these children, and I'm tired of seeing them over and over again, even though we're giving them the right medications. There's the invisible enemy that we are working on building momentum for, so that we limit that exposure. And that's what's so key, and that's what I think is so important that we're hitting on today. It's not a one-time thing. It's not a one-time conversation. It's a grassroots effort in communities, so that we can prevent that baseline air pollution and exposure that is continuing to trigger these children's health issues and asthma.
Thank you so much, Dr. Levy, for that great overview. The next question I have is for Dr. Scott, and I see you kind of answered it in the chat, but just to reiterate for other attendees, what are your thoughts on having the daily air quality index posted at daycare centers, schools, locations that involve a lot of children engagement, etc. This would assist in dictating outdoor activities of children during times of poor air quality. Can the health department lead such an initiative?
Right, thank you for that question. And as mentioned, there is a response in the chat, but for those of you who don't have access, I think that that's a great example of a policy change or a systems change that could occur to just expand access to information for community to make informed decisions. Our team does have a child care health consultants program that works directly with daycare centers. So I think that's something that we could definitely present back to them to explore, how feasible that is to adopt within our local systems. But I think it's a good suggestion between that group and our school health team. There might be some opportunities to explore the feasibility of the air quality index in those locations. But I think that's a great example of an advocacy initiative that can make a local systems change to improve access to information.
Thank you so much, Dr. Scott. So I just wanted to open up the floor to anyone else that may have questions. Feel free to unmute yourself or type them in the chat. And if not, I believe Kirsten may have a couple questions.
I have a comment that I didn't mention before. We don't think about changing mattresses, particularly for the elderly and our children that, wet the bed and maybe are incontinent in the bed. But that's really important because what germs need to grow is a warm, moist, dark place. And what better place than a mattress? We don't think about our shoes, setting them out in the sunshine, fungus infections. And when you're on medications, they work great for that particular thing, but it defuncts our immune system in some other areas. And the homeless don't get to change their shoes and socks. And they're often given contaminated shoes and socks. And so when you're giving things to shelters, make sure that it's something that you want, something that you don't want. Absolutely. And keeping everything clean and before you give it away.
Absolutely. And dust and all the things that accumulate in our homes definitely sit on our sheets. So it's good to wash sheets in it. We had a last presenter mention that as well, helps to reduce the impacts of allergies and asthma and things of that nature. So yeah, make sure you're definitely washing your sheets as much as you can.
And particularly the pillows.
Yeah, absolutely. So any other questions or comments? And if not, I will, well, we do have about 5 minutes left, so I can close this out as well. We do have a couple of announcements.
I have one quick question unless someone else has something to say.
Go ahead, Mr. Ron.
Okay. To either of the panelists here, there's been a lot the last couple of years about Black women that have been pregnant and they've encountered problems with the physicians not acknowledging their problems, what they're saying is wrong. And it has resulted in a lot of complications because the physicians haven't listened to what the women were telling them. As one case was, most recently was Venus Williams expressed that. So if either of you could address that as a concern or recommendations or how someone can possibly deal with that. I don't put anybody on the spot.
Oh, no, I'm happy to start. That is definitely an issue and a concern that we are hoping that we can help address at the public health system. One thing that we've done is try to expand access to doulas, especially for Black women. We have a variety of maternal and child health programs that either expand access to doulas or nurse case managers that can help pregnant, especially pregnant Black women, navigate the health system and have an advocate to help navigate the system and advocate on their behalf during some of those challenging situations. We have programs for women who have been identified as high risk. We have programs, again, a guided journey program that focuses on women that may not have access to health insurance or other resources to connect them to adequate health care. So all of these tools we're hoping will help just connect persons to resources, to have advocates to help on their behalf. Also, but we know this is a systems issue. We have to also address the providers who have barriers in place as well. So we are looking at opportunities through some of our programs for how we can expand access to trainings and opportunities to expand resources to help increase that knowledge amongst providers. But we know that's an uphill battle that will take time to shift mindsets and ideologies. But on our end, we're doing what we can to provide access to those supports through doulas and other trained professionals that can advocate on persons' behalves.
Absolutely.
Another thing that we can do is write down what your needs are, what your problems are. You got to remember that physicians have so many patients that they need to see an hour. They have a lot on their mind, so we need to be advocates for our healthcare providers. So if you can have a list and then give that list as you're talking to the doctor, to the nurse practitioner, they are there to help you and bless you. And so it's all of the medical team, but they are also multitask people, and they are going to need to see it. They're not going to have time to pull it up on your stuff off their computer and put it on theirs. So you need to put it in writing, and you need to do it in your quiet time, because when parents are taking children to the doctor and they're having an asthma attack, they're not thinking about what happened 15 to 20 minutes before. So the doctor doesn't have enough information to really sometimes prescribe the correct medicine, because they don't know what happened before, and they don't know what situation that family is in either. So it's important to write it down.
Absolutely. And just to bring back a good point that Dr. Robinson had brought up at our last session is record your conversations with your doctors. We can't always remember everything that we're asking our doctors when we go in. And so recording that and making sure you have record and so you can revisit what they're saying. I would also recommend just asking the physician how they address the disparities within their own practice. How are they aware of the statistics? What do they do within their own practice to make sure that you don't become another statistic and another Black woman that falls susceptible to those outcomes? So I do want to be mindful of everyone's time. We are at a minute before closing. So I just wanted to close up with some upcoming events that we have. Our most recent being the October 15th Historic West End Federal Air Monitor Open House. So I did mention that we do monitoring within the West End, and we actually were able to advocate for a federal EPA air monitor from the monitoring that was undergoing in the West End. So we're having an open house finally for that monitor on October 15th from 9 to 11. We will send more information out about that event in the follow-up email. We also are developing a Historic West End green team. A lot has been said tonight about the benefits of green spaces, green infrastructure, trees, etc. So we have multiple infrastructure and garden projects going that are underway in the West End. We're looking to Historic West End residents to help maintain those sites and to help learn about the benefits through that process. So if you are interested in being a part of that, please let me know. And we will send this stuff out in the email, but I just wanted to highlight here Medical Advocates for Healthy Air. Kirsten, did you want to say a little bit about that program?
Yes. So Medical Advocates for Healthy Air is an initiative within the health program, Clean Air NC, and it's comprised of health professionals, so clinicians such as Dr. Aaron Levy. He's been a longtime veteran within MAHA and is an advisory board leader. but we're recruiting individuals. So whether you're a nurse, you're a clinician, social work, public health, we're really looking in regards of when it's at the language, Dr. Scott, boots on the ground, the individuals who are actually part of the work are working with community members. We want to provide the knowledge as it relates to environmental and air pollution, because that may be a gap area. And something that I am looking forward to doing as it relates to MAHA is just making sure that providers such as Dr. Levy, they feel supported. So, because the work that everyone on this call does is not easy, and self-care is very, very important as well, making sure that mental health is dressed as well. So that's something I want to continue to build upon. But you can actually join us in MAHA if you visit Clean Air NC website on the health page. You can fill out a Google form and just look forward to, there's going to be more engagement moving forward.
Yeah, and I would just encourage, you know, as you visit your doctors and your nurses, encourage them to be a part of this network, and to, you know, help them both educate themselves to be able to better educate their patients. And then lastly, this is just a thank you slide. Thank you so much for everyone's participation today. I've included my email as well as Kirsten's email. And if the panelists are comfortable that joined today, we are more than welcome to send out their contact information as well, as a resource to you if your questions didn't get answered today. But Kirsten and I are always available as a resource for questions and things of that nature, if anyone has any. So again, thank you so much to all of our panelists. Thank you so much to all of our attendees today. We really thank you for your time on this Saturday morning, afternoon, and I hope everyone has a great day.